at September 5, 1944, 02:07 hours, on a muddy ridgeline outside the Belgian village of Sars-la-Bruyere. A 5'9", 158-pound factory floor worker from Peckville, Pennsylvania, sat behind a .30 caliber M1919A4 Browning machine gun and listened to boots coming from 3 directions at once. His name was Gino Joseph Merli. He was 20 years old. 3 hours earlier, his company had dug in on this ridge to stop a German relief column estimated at battalion strength, roughly 400 soldiers pressing toward a gap in the Allied line. The attack had come before midnight, and it had not stopped since. Now, at 02:17, the position looked like this. The left flank had collapsed. The right was silent, which meant the men there were either dead or had pulled back into the darkness. His assistant gunner, Private First Class Raymond Ladd, lay unconscious in the bottom of the foxhole, badly wounded, breathing, but unable to fight. The ammunition count was dropping past 600 rounds, remaining from an original 1,200. And the German assault, the main wave, not a patrol, not a probe, but a full company-strength assault in attack formation, was now crossing the open ground in front of his position at a run. He had the Bronze Star already. He had the Silver Star. Both were in his pack. He had not talked about either one. He swung the gun left. He fired. He swung right. He fired. He was buying seconds. The German line kept coming. 20 yards. 15. A shape materialized out of the dark almost directly in front of the foxhole. Not running, walking, upright. A German NCO with a Schmeisser MP40 submachine gun across his chest, moving toward the position with the calm of a man who believes the position is already finished. The NCO stopped. He called out in English. His English was clear, American. "Stand up. You are surrounded. Put down your weapon." Gino Merli heard those words. What happened in the next 90 seconds was later confirmed by an enemy body count at first light, recorded in a presidential citation, and never once discussed by the man who made it happen for the rest of his long and quiet life. If you want to see how this ends, stay with us. But first, who was Gino Merli? And how did a production line worker from a Pennsylvania coal town end up alone on a machine gun in Belgium, surrounded at 2 in the morning, being asked to surrender? Gino Joseph Merli was born on May 13, 1924, in Peckville, Pennsylvania. A borough so small it folds inside another borough, tucked into the folds of Blakely Township on the eastern edge of Lackawanna County. This is anthracite coal country. The mountains here are not majestic. They are worked, stripped and regrown and stripped again over generations, their contours shaped as much by mining operations as by geology. The towns that grew up around the mines, Peckville, Oliphant, Jessup, Blakely, are close together and close-knit and do not produce people who expect the world to take notice of them. The Merli family had come from Italy. His father worked. His mother worked. Gino grew up in a household where hardship was not a crisis to be managed. It was simply the ambient condition of life, and you dealt with it without drama because the alternative was not dealing with it, and that was worse. He had 3 siblings. The family was Catholic. They went to Mass. They kept the house. They did not have money to spare, and they did not speak about it. He enrolled at Blakely High School and moved through it without leaving a particular mark. No varsity letters. No student council office. His teachers would later describe him, when journalists came looking after the war, as quiet, attentive, a young man who sat in the back of the classroom and listened more carefully than anyone realized until you asked him a question and discovered he had retained everything. At graduation, he stood 5 feet 9 inches and weighed 158 pounds. He had dark hair, a square jaw, and a way of watching a room before committing to any part of it. This was not suspicion. It was patience. The two look similar from the outside, but they produce very different men. After school, he went to work on the production floor of a local manufacturing plant. Repetitive assembly work, the kind where your hands learn the motion before your mind does, where the measure of a good day is that nothing went wrong, and the quota was met. He was 18 when he started. He did not complain about it. He went in, did the work, came home. He was still 18 when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. He did not run to the recruiter's office the next morning. He read the news. He went home. He ate dinner with his family. He thought about it the way men who understand weight always think about hard things. Not with panic, but with the deliberate patience of someone calculating what is actually being asked of them. His draft notice arrived in 1943. He read it. He set it on the kitchen table. He told his mother he was going, and she already knew, and she did not cry in front of him, because that was not what the Merli family did with hard things. At the induction physical, he weighed 157 pounds stripped down. The examining doctor marked his eyesight as sharp, his reflexes above standard, his psychological temperament rating on the Army's screening instrument stable. He was classified as fit for combat infantry and assigned to basic training. His drill sergeant noticed something in the first week. During a live fire exercise that sent 2 other trainees flat on the ground and a third scrambling sideways out of his lane, Merli had stayed behind his assigned position, adjusted his sight picture, and continued firing. The sergeant did not say anything to him directly. He wrote in his evaluation, "This soldier will hold." He did not know yet what he was predicting. At the end of basic training, the Army assigned Gino Merli to the machine gun crew as the primary gunner. His instructor said the reason was simple. The machine gun required, above all other qualities, the ability to remain in position when everything in the human nervous system was screaming to move. Some men had that quality. Most did not. Merli had it to a degree the instructor had not previously encountered in a training cohort. He put on his uniform. He reported for unit assignment. The war was a long way away and getting closer. Private Gino Merli was assigned to Company A, 18th Infantry Regiment, 1st Infantry Division, the oldest continuously serving division in the United States Army and, by 1944, one of its most battle-tested. The 1st Infantry Division's shoulder patch was a simple red numeral 1 on an olive drab background. The soldiers who wore it called themselves the Big Red One, and they had earned the right to that name in ways that were not rhetorical. The division had landed in North Africa in November 1942. It had fought through Tunisia, taking casualties in the mountain passes that military planners back in Washington had underestimated. It had gone ashore in Sicily in July 1943 and fought its way across that island in 38 days of grinding summer heat. It was, by the time Merli joined it in early 1944, a division of men who did not need anyone to explain to them what war actually felt like. He was issued a .30 caliber M1919A4 Browning air-cooled machine gun. The weapon weighed 31 pounds unloaded and 53 pounds mounted on its M2 tripod. It fed from a disintegrating link belt at a cyclic rate of 400 to 600 rounds per minute and was capable of sustained accurate fire at targets up to 1,100 yards with a trained gunner behind it. The barrel would overheat under sustained fire and required changing, a procedure that normally required 2 men, one to hold the weapon steady while the other removed and replaced the barrel, assembly, and which had to be done without burning through the asbestos gloves or losing the new barrel in the dark. He became a trained gunner behind it. Then he became the best trained gunner in his section. He did not announce this. It became apparent from results. The 1st Infantry Division was assigned to Operation Overlord. On June 6, 1944, its assault regiments went ashore at Omaha Beach in Normandy, France. The 18th Infantry Regiment, Merli's regiment, came in as the 2nd assault wave, which meant they stepped off their landing craft into a situation that had already cost the first wave somewhere. Near 40% casualties, and they had to walk through what that looked like to reach their objectives. Merli went up the beach. He did not stop. His promotion to Private First Class came on July 18, 1944, in the hedgerow country of Normandy. The bocage terrain that had turned what everyone expected to be a rapid breakout into 6 weeks of room-by-room, field-by-field fighting, in which the Allied advantage in armor meant almost nothing, because the hedgerows themselves, earthen berms grown over centuries, were natural tank barriers. He received no explanation for the promotion. A sergeant handed him the new insignia and told him to put it on. He put it on. The division moved east through the summer. France fell behind them kilometer by kilometer. Belgium lay ahead. June 6, 1944, 07:30 hours. Omaha Beach, Normandy, France. The machine gun section hit the sand running. His loader, the second man on the gun crew, stayed close on Merli's left, carrying the reserve ammunition boxes. The noise on the beach was not dramatic in the way that the word nods suggests. It was structural. It removed thought from the equation and replaced it with reflex. Men who had intact reflexes moved. Men who lost them stopped moving. There was no intermediate state. The problem, in the first 20 minutes on the beach, was a German MG-42 position on the bluffs to the northeast. Elevated, zeroed on the kill zone below, firing at a cyclic rate of 1,200 rounds per minute, twice the American weapons rate, at a pitch so high it sounded like tearing fabric, rather than the familiar mechanical thud American soldiers had trained on. The MG-42's position covered a wide arc of the beach. Men crossing a 40-yard section of open sand were catching its fire from a deflection angle that most of the returning American fire was missing. Merli moved left along the waterline. He found a Belgian gate, one of the welded steel obstacles German engineers had installed to wreck landing craft at mid-tide, and used it as a partial firing rest. It was not cover. It was a steel frame with spaces in it. But it put something solid between him and the direct line to the MG-42, and it was what was available. He opened fire at the MG-42 position at approximately 300 yards. He was not expecting to kill the crew at that range from that position. He expected to force them down, to break their rate of fire, to give the men on his right side 3 seconds to move. He walked the tracer rounds up the slope. The MG-42 went quiet for 11 seconds. In those 11 seconds, a full squad from Company A crossed 30 yards of open sand and reached the base of the bluff. The MG-42 came back up. But the squad was below its depression angle now. They were inside the weapon's dead ground. They could not be hit. They were alive because a machine gunner from Peckville had bought them 11 seconds and used every one of them. Merli's position took return fire within moments. A rifle round struck the steel frame of the Belgian gate 6 inches from his left shoulder. He did not move. He shifted right, looking for secondary positions on the bluff. He found a concealed MG-34 nest in a drainage cut, approximately 180 yards to his right. He repositioned the gun manually, dragging it sideways on its bipod, no time for the tripod, and engaged. 18 rounds. The position went silent. By 09:45, elements of the 18th Infantry had breached the bluff at 2 separate locations. The beach, still contested, was no longer the killing ground it had been at H-Hour. Merli's section had expended 740 rounds in approximately 90 minutes of continuous or intermittent fire. He had suppressed or neutralized 3 separate enemy firing positions. He had also taken a grazing wound. A bullet had opened a 3-inch laceration across his left forearm, and had not reported it to his squad leader until the section halted for a weapons check at 11 hours. His squad leader told him to get it bandaged. He got it bandaged. Then he picked up the gun. He received no individual award for June 6th. The regiment was cited as a unit. His name appeared in no specific report that day. He was one of thousands of men who did what needed doing and were not separately noticed for it. That was fine with Gino Merli. The fighting in the bocage through June and July was worse in some ways than the beach. Slower, closer, without the clarity of a single defined objective. Every hedgerow was its own problem. Every field transition required a new solution. In action near Saint-Lô on July 14, 1944, Merli's section provided suppressive fire that allowed 2 rifle squads to flank and clear a farmhouse being used as a German observation post. 3 enemy soldiers killed, 4 captured, 1 American wounded. His squad leader submitted a Bronze Star recommendation citing calmness under fire and effective employment of organic weapons. He accepted the award. He put it in his pack. He did not mention it. The regiment moved east. The summer campaign became a pursuit. The Germans were retreating across northern France, and for the first time since Normandy, American soldiers were moving fast enough that supply lines struggled to keep up. August and September 1944. Northern France into Belgium. The pursuit phase changed the character of the war from grinding to chaotic. Units pushed ahead of their resupply columns. Companies fought on reduced ammunition loads. The 1st Infantry Division was part of Feet Corps, pushing northeast toward Belgium at a pace that would have been unimaginable 2 months earlier. Near Mons, Belgium, on September 2nd, 1944, the pursuit ran into something unexpected. A large pocket of German forces, intelligence estimated 20,000 to 30,000 soldiers, had been cut off by the rapid Allied advance and was trying to break eastward through any gap they could find. A desperate, trapped force is more dangerous than a confident, advancing one. Every man in that pocket knew what capture meant, and many of them chose to fight their way through rather than find out. Company A's position north of Mons was hit that morning by a breakout column. Approximately 600 soldiers from mixed Wehrmacht and Waffen-SS units, moving in road column formation through a tree line that American staff officers had marked as lightly defended. They had marked it before Merli's section moved into it. The column broke from the tree line at 06:40 hours. The lead element, 80 soldiers, came across an open field at a run, firing from the hip, with no particular formation. They were not executing a tactical assault. They were trying to physically break through anything in front of them and keep moving east. Merli did not wait for an order. He opened fire at 150 yards. The M919A4 at 150 yards against infantry in the open, traversing right to left in controlled bursts, is a catastrophic weapon. The lead element of the column staggered. Survivors dropped flat or broke right. They tried to get around the American position to the north. They ran into another section from Company A. They tried south. Merli was already walking his fire south. The column stalled. German NCOs tried to organize a fire and movement response. It took them 4 minutes to establish any coherence. And in those 4 minutes, 3 other American machine gun positions in the vicinity had joined the engagement. The column's ability to maneuver as a unit was broken. By 08:15, the breakout attempt at this junction had failed. German soldiers were surrendering in groups of 5 and 10, emerging from the tree line with their hands visible and their weapons on the ground. At Merli's position alone, 29 enemy killed, 67 captured. His section, 0 casualties, rounds expended, 100. The barrel of the M1919A4 was hot to the touch for 20 minutes after the firing stopped. During the engagement, a German rifle grenade had impacted approximately 8 feet from the gun position. Blast fragmentation opened a cut above Merli's right eye and left shrapnel scoring across his right shoulder. His medic cleaned the cut and applied a field dressing and recommended evaluation for possible concussion. Merli declined. He had a gun to clean and a barrel to inspect. His platoon leader, Lieutenant Harold Vance, submitted a Silver Star recommendation the same day. The citation referenced Merli's unflinching fire discipline and decisive action under heavy enemy pressure. Captain Richard Ames, the company commander, noted Merli formally in the unit journal as the most reliable weapons team in the company. The Silver Star was processed. The company moved. 2 days later, September 4th, 1944, Company A dug in on a ridgeline near Sars-la-Bruyere. Intelligence had reported a German counterattack was possible. The word possible was doing a lot of work in that sentence. The intelligence was accurate. Here is what the night of September 4th into the 5th actually looked like from the ground, from the inside. By 18 Clyde hours, the company was in position. Captain Ames had 82 effective riflemen and 2 machine gun sections, 84 men total to hold a ridgeline that his tactical map told him was the critical point in Figcor's flank. He did not like the terrain. The left flank was open. A sunken lane provided a covered approach route that he could not seal adequately with the men he had. The right was bordered by a tree line dense enough to hide a battalion in formation. He dug his company in anyway, because the regiment's orders required him to hold this ground, and Ames was not a man who sent orders back up the chain explaining why he couldn't hold ground. Merli's section was assigned the center of the line, the position that controlled the most open ground, and was therefore both the most critical and the most exposed. His assistant gunner was Private First Class Raymond Ladd, 21 years old, from Columbus, Ohio. They had worked together since the Normandy beach. They communicated on the gun in the shorthand of men who have done the same dangerous work together, long enough that the words have been replaced by glances and timing. They dug the foxhole. They established their field of fire. Left arc to the sunken lane, right arc to the tree line edge, primary engagement zone, the 90 yards of open ground directly in front. They laid out the ammunition, 200 rounds of .30 caliber in linked belts, 6 M2 fragmentation grenades, and Merli's M1911A1 .45 caliber pistol, with 2 7-round magazines. They settled in. The sun went down at 1947. At 21:30, a patrol from the right flank reported hearing tracked vehicles approximately 2 miles east. Distant artillery. Captain Ames called regiment. Regiment confirmed. A German relief column, estimated at battalion strength with possible armored elements, was moving toward the Allied line. Their probable axis of advance intersected Company A's position. Battalion strength: 400 to 500 infantry, plus possible armor, against 82 men. Ames told his platoon leaders to expect contact before first light, and told them to hold their positions. He did not tell them what to do if the position became untenable. Possibly he believed they already knew. If you have been watching this channel and have not yet subscribed, this is the moment, because what happens next on this ridge, in this darkness, is the kind of story that should be in every history book on this subject, and it is in almost none of them. Hit subscribe. Stay with us. At 01:15 on September 5, 1944, the tree line began to move. German soldiers emerged in skirmish line formation, not running, moving deliberately, using the terrain and the darkness. Captain Ames held the order to fire. He wanted them closer. They came closer. At 1:40, he gave the order. The ridge erupted. Every weapon in Company A opened simultaneously. M1 Garand's, M1918A2 Browning automatic rifles, 2 M1919A4 machine guns, and 60mm mortar rounds falling in the open ground between the tree line and the ridge crest. The first German wave hit the ground or came apart. Survivors fell back to the tree line. 30 seconds of silence. Then the second wave emerged, larger, moving faster, using smoke grenades to break the American sight lines. They came from 3 directions: the trees line, the sunken lane to the left, and a shallow draw on the right that American reconnaissance had not flagged as a viable approach route. The left flank started to fail first. The 2 rifle squads assigned to the sunken lane approach took casualties in the first minutes of the second assault and began pulling back. The left side of the American line folded. German soldiers poured through the gap and came behind Merli's position. At 02:05, a German squad, 8 men, materialized from the direction of the sunken lane, 30 yards to the left and rear of Merli's foxhole. They were crouched, moving fast, rifles forward. Private First Class Raymond Ladd saw them. He stood up. He was hit immediately. He fell across the rear of the gun mount. Merli pulled Ladd back and down into the foxhole with his left arm, keeping his right hand on the gun's right spade grip. He could not check whether Ladd was alive. The 8 German soldiers from behind were now 20 yards out and closing. He swung the gun left. The mount traverse gave him roughly 45 degrees and fired a burst of 12 rounds at 20 yards into 8 men. 3 went down. The remaining 5 scattered into the darkness. He swung the gun front. The main assault had resumed. The second German wave had reorganized in the smoke and was now coming across the open ground again. What appeared in the darkness to be 2 full rifle companies in assault formation, running, shooting. 200 men crossing 90 yards of open field directly at his position. 1 man, 1 gun, 200 rounds, minus whatever he had already fired. No assistant gunner. He did not leave. The gun traversed right to left and back. Short controlled bursts. He was not spraying. He was selecting. Finding the squad leaders moving upright, the men carrying light machine guns, the momentum carriers in the assault formation whose fall would hesitate the men behind them. He was making targeting decisions faster than they should have been possible for a single gunner without a spotter. At 02:17, the German assault's leading elements reached the outer edge of his cleared ground. 20 yards from the foxhole, 15, a German NCO stopped walking. He stood upright in the darkness. His English was clear. "American, stand up. You are surrounded. Put down your weapon." Gino Merli fired a 12-round burst in the direction of the voice. Then he went completely still. He slumped forward over the gun mount. His face went down. His right hand stayed on the pistol grip inside the guard, finger outside the trigger. His eyes stayed open. He did not blink. The German soldiers sweeping across the open ground saw a foxhole with a dead gunner slumped over his weapon. They moved past it. They had a ridge line to take and a gap to exploit, and no reason to spend time on a position that was already finished. They moved through what had been the American line. German NCOs directed squads left and right. A German officer spoke in a low voice approximately 12 meters behind Merli's position. 22 seconds passed. Merli rose up on the gun. He opened fire to the rear. A 40-round burst at 12 meters into a concentration of soldiers who had no idea the position was still manned. The effect in the darkness at that range was absolute. He swung the gun, front fired, swept left, fired. A German soldier appeared on the lip of the foxhole, standing directly above him, looking down. Merli released the gun grip, drew the M19111A1, fired twice at a distance of 18 inches. The soldier fell. He was back on the gun in 4 seconds. The German assault fractured. The soldiers who had passed the position and were now taking fire from behind them, from a position they had certified as neutralized, did not know what they were dealing with. The organized assault became a disorganized one. Small groups pulled back. Others went to ground. The coherence of the attack, the momentum that had broken the left flank and was threatening to roll up the American line, went out of it. Between 02:17 and 03:45, 1 hour and 28 minutes of continuous close quarters engagement. Gino Merli held the position alone. At 03:20, the barrel of the M1919A4 reached critical temperature. The weapon would destroy itself if he continued firing without changing the barrel. Changing the barrel on an M1919A4 under normal conditions requires 2 men. One to hold the weapon in place, and one to manage the barrel assembly, the barrel buffer, the booster, and the locking mechanism while wearing the heavy asbestos mitts that prevent third-degree burns to both hands. It is a 2-man procedure. Merli changed the barrel alone, in the dark, under intermittent fire, using one hand to hold the weapon and one hand to manage the change. He knocked the barrel latch, used his forearm and the edge of the foxhole to brace the receiver, pulled the barrel with the mitt, seated the new barrel, re-engaged the lock. 90 seconds. He resumed firing. He played dead 3 more times before dawn, twice when German soldiers specifically approached the foxhole to check it. Once when a German officer swept the area with a flashlight from 20 feet away. Each time he lay still. Each time they passed. Each time he rose back up. By 04, the German attack had lost its shape. The survivors were pulling back to the tree line in small groups, some carrying wounded, some not. The pressure across the entire American line was breaking. At 05:47, first light came over the ridge. At 06:15, Captain Ames walked the position personally. He found Merli still behind the gun. The weapon was too hot to touch. Every ammunition can around the foxhole was empty. Raymond Ladd was alive in the bottom of the hole, badly wounded but breathing. Ames walked the ground in front of the foxhole. He counted enemy dead. He stopped counting at 52. He stood for a moment. Then he said, "Son, who's still with you?" Merli looked up from the gun. He looked at the foxhole beside him. Empty, the men who had been there gone into the darkness hours ago. "Just me," he said. Captain Ames filed his after-action report by 10 on September 5, 1944. In the section describing Merli's actions, he wrote that the machine gunner had held his position alone through more than 90 minutes of sustained close-quarters assault, had feigned death multiple times to allow enemy forces to pass and then engage them from the rear, had changed his barrel under fire without assistance, and had produced the largest concentration of enemy casualties at any single American position during the entire night engagement. The Medal of Honor recommendation went up the chain of command within 48 hours. The regimental surgeon's examination confirmed 52 enemy dead within immediate proximity of the foxhole. An intelligence assessment estimated at least 30 additional wounded had been carried or withdrawn before first light. The combined confirmed and estimated enemy casualties attributable to one machine gunner with 1,200 rounds of ammunition and 2 pistol magazines, somewhere above 80 men. The field hospital saw Merli on September 5th. not because he reported for his own wounds, but because he had walked to the aid station alongside the litter carrying Raymond Ladd, and the duty medic had noticed the blood on his forearms and the blast scoring across his shoulder and the dried cut above his eye and made him sit down. The doctor told him to rest for at least 48 hours. He returned to Company A the following morning. The 1st Infantry Division continued fighting. The Hurtgen Forest, starting in November 1944. 19 square miles of dense German woodland that consumed American divisions at a rate that shocked even commanders who had been in the war since North Africa, the Siegfried Line. Then December and the German winter counteroffensive, the Ardennes Offensive, the Battle of the Bulge, which threw the entire Allied line into its worst crisis since the Normandy landings. The 1st Division was among the units that absorbed the German assault, held, and eventually pushed back. Through all of it, Gino Merli remained with Company A, 18th Infantry Regiment. The Medal of Honor paperwork moved through military channels over the following year. In August 1945, with the war in Europe finished and the Pacific War 2 weeks ended, the recommendation was approved at the highest level. On August 23, 1945, President Harry S. Truman placed the Medal of Honor around the neck of Private First Class Gino J. Merli at a ceremony in Washington, D.C. Truman looked at him and said, according to witnesses who were present that day, "I'd rather be wearing this thing than be the president." Merli's complete list of decorations at discharge: Medal of Honor, Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor Device, Purple Heart, European African Middle Eastern Campaign Medal with 4 campaign stars, American Campaign Medal, World War II Victory Medal. He was 21 years old. Private First Class Gino Merli was discharged from the United States Army in late 1945. He came back to Peckville, Pennsylvania. He went home. He ate dinner with his family. He did not give interviews. He did not arrange speaking engagements. He did not write a book, consult on a film, or position himself for any benefit that the Medal of Honor might have opened for him in a country that was, in the autumn of 1945, turning some returning veterans into minor celebrities. He went back to work. He took a position at the Jessup Wire Company in Peckville, production floor work, running wire manufacturing equipment, clocking in and clocking out like every other man in the plant. Not management, not a supervisory role offered out of courtesy to a decorated veteran. Floor work. Because that was what the job was, and the job needed doing, and Gino Merli did jobs that needed doing. He married Beatrice Smay in 1946. They had children. They stayed in Peckville, not a temporary stop before somewhere else, not a transitional residence while he figured out his next chapter. They stayed because Peckville was home and home was where you lived. He did not need a new identity. He had the one he'd always had. The Medal of Honor hung on the wall of his house, and that was the extent of the display. When visitors asked about it, he said it represented what had happened one night in Belgium. If they pushed for more, he resisted being pushed. This was not false modesty. It was something more considered than that. He believed, in the way combat veterans often believe this, that what had happened in that foxhole was the product of circumstances, that the circumstances had made the actions possible, and that anyone could do what he had done if they were in that foxhole with those choices and those obligations in front of them. He did not believe this was an argument against courage. He believed it was an accurate description of what courage actually is. He became involved in the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, at his local post in Lackawanna County. For decades, he did the actual work of that organization, helping veterans navigate the benefit system, showing up for community events, making sure that the men who came back from Korea and then Vietnam had a community waiting for them rather than a silence. When Vietnam veterans returned to towns that received them poorly, Merli was among those who explicitly worked to integrate them into the same network that had been built for World War II veterans. He understood what it meant to do your job in a situation that people at home could not fully picture. He retired from the wire company after decades of employment. He and Beatrice celebrated anniversaries. He watched his children grow. He stayed in Peckville. The city named a section of a local road after him, a sign at a road intersection, A ceremony with neighbors and council members gathered on a Tuesday. He attended. He thanked them. He went home. He did not talk much about Belgium. Occasionally, very rarely, he talked about the men he had served with, about Lad recovering from his wounds, about the company, about the way the 1st Division had moved through France and Belgium, with a particular kind of institutional discipline that he believed came from the men having been tested so many times before he ever arrived. He talked about the men. He did not talk about the foxhole. Gino Joseph Merli died on June 11, 2002, in Peckville, Pennsylvania. He was 78 years old. He died at home among family. He had spent his entire life within a few miles of where he was born. He was buried in St. Michael's Cemetery in Peckville, Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania. His grave carries a standard military headstone, flat granite, name, dates, branch of service, and the designation, Medal of Honor. The marker does not mention 52 confirmed dead. It does not describe the barrel change in the dark. It says nothing about a German voice calling out in the night, asking him to surrender. All of that is in the presidential citation. The citation is in the National Archives. Most people who grew up in Lackawanna County in the last 25 years do not know his name. His record is this. On a ridge line near Sars-la-Bruyere, Belgium, in the early hours of September 5, 1944, with his assistant gunner unconscious in the foxhole beside him and his position overrun, on 3 sides, Private First Class Gino Merli held a machine gun position alone for more than 90 minutes against a German assault estimated at 400 soldiers. He accounted for 52 enemy dead confirmed at first light, with additional wounded estimated by his commanders. He received no assistance. He asked for none. He changed his barrel alone in the dark. He played dead 4 times. He rose back up 4 times. He was 20 years old. That is not a story about a different kind of human being. It is a story about ordinary human capacity, the kind that does not know it is there until the circumstances require it. It is the kind of story that makes you wonder, walking past the man clocking into the wire factory in the morning, what is possible and unseen in the people you pass every day. Gino Merli went back to the wire factory. He clocked in. He did the work. He came home. He never once suggested that what he had done was anything other than the obvious thing to do. The story of Gino Merli is not in any major documentary series. It is not taught in schools outside of Peckville, and even there, not always, he is not the subject of a feature film. His name is not in the vocabulary of the general public the way the names of other decorated veterans from his war have become. This channel exists because that is wrong. Because the stories that deserve to be remembered are often the quietest ones, held by men who came home, went back to work, and never asked to be found. If this video gave you something, a name you did not know, a story you did not expect, please like it and subscribe. Every click genuinely helps pull stories like this one out of the archive and put them in front of people who should know them. We have more names. We will keep coming back. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Tell us if someone in your family served, and whether their story has been told. And one last thing about Gino Merli. After the war, a journalist finally got him to sit for a brief interview. The journalist asked him what he had been thinking in that foxhole at 02:17 in the morning, when the German NCO stood 15 feet away in the dark and called out in English, demanding that he stand up, that he put down his weapon, that he surrender. Merli thought about the question for a moment. Then he said, "I was thinking about getting the gun back on target." That was all he said.